Girded by two deserts, the Namib to the west and the Kalahari to the east, Namibia has borne the yoke of colonial occupation for over 100 years. Annexed by Germany in 1884, trusteeship of Namibia was handed to South Africa by the League of Nations in 1920. This mandate was terminated by the International Court of Justice in 1971, and South Africa's occupation of Namibia ruled illegal. In defiance of this ruling, South Africa has entrenched its occupation of Namibia. An estimated 100,000 South African troops and their military hardware have transformed Namibia into apartheid's northern frontier garrison, a harsh and permanent intrusion in the lives of the people of Namibia. Organized resistance to apartheid occupation began on a mass scale in 1957 with the formation of the Avombaland People's Congress. In April 1960, it was renamed SWAPO, the Southwest African People's Organization. Harassed and closely monitored by the South African authorities, SWAPO enjoys mass support within Namibia and operates as a legal political organization. From outside, more than 80,000 Namibian refugees wait to return home. As SWAPO's military wing, PLAN, the People's Liberation Army of Namibia, wages the armed struggle against the South African forces of occupation. A bitter war, now 22 years old. In this protracted struggle to rid Namibia of South African occupation, some 20,000 guerrillas, operating from a politically supportive base amongst the people, carry out sabotage and direct assaults on strategic military installations. For Namibians, weary of war, peace and independence is an unfulfilled dream. 10 years ago, a peace plan, negotiated by the so-called Western Five Nations, reached agreement between SWAPO and South Africa. Adopted by the United Nations on the 29th of September 1978 as Resolution 435, the peace plan provides for a ceasefire, the return of exiles, withdrawal of South African troops from Namibia, and free and fair elections under United Nations supervision. Although party to the original agreement, for 10 years Pretoria has thwarted the implementation of Resolution 435, and with it, Namibian independence. With South Africa's frequent incursions into Angola to the north, the war has escalated. Roughly 60% of Namibia's 1.2 million people live in the northern war zone. With the majority of men either fighting as guerrillas or forced by rural poverty to seek employment in industrialized areas, the brunt of this existence is borne by the women and children. Enduring the ravages of war, women raise families and tend the homesteads. In spite of prolonged drought, working the arid soil, they subsist from corn crops of mahangu, the pips of omungongo melons, and the nutritious centers of the hard ingongo nuts. Although Namibia is a country rich in natural wealth, a meager percentage goes to the people. Foreign exploitation of mineral resources channels profits from Namibia's riches to South Africa and the international headquarters of multinationals. The tranquil African lifestyle has long been shattered by the impact of foreign intrusion in Namibia, but the consequences of occupation by South African security forces have far-reaching implications. Civilian life is cheap. Suspicion that guerrillas have visited a village frequently leads to destruction of homesteads, beatings, rape and torture of villagers to elicit information. Under South African law in Namibia, brother is turned against brother, as the sons of Namibia are conscripted to fight against their own liberation. Compulsory conscription of all Namibian males for 2 years into SWATF, the Southwest African Territorial Forces, Namibianizes South Africa's war against SWAPO. To escape conscription into the South African security forces, an estimated 8,000 young Namibians fled Namibia to join PLAN, the People's Liberation Army, in the first 3 months of 1981, when conscription was enforced.
Daar is nie 'n moeder wat vir u sal sê in sy wis, my seun moet gaan, weermag toe nie.
There is not one mother in Namibia who will say to you, my son must go. Not one. The thing is that the people are very frightened because we were always intimidated by the police and the army as to the consequences. If we did not make the children go, we were threatened with 6 years imprisonment or a fine of 6,000 rand. And that is why we allowed the children to be conscripted. The reason we are opposed to conscription is, against whom are they fighting? This is the question. Because those people that are on the other side are our people who are fighting against the injustice here. And we know how we have suffered. We have been oppressed. Morning Assembly, Bursaba Private Ecumenical School, Southern Namibia. Because of the overwhelming support for SWAPO in the northern war zone, the South African authorities have focused their conscription drive to the mid and southern regions of Namibia. Here in the south at Bursaba, young Namibians in their final year of school have received call-up papers, ordering them to serve for 2 years in the security forces. Petrus Vleermees, trumpeter in the school band, is one of a number of young Namibians at this school who is refusing to be conscripted to fight for South Africa against fellow Namibians.
Conscription. Ag, ek eintlik as onwettig.
Conscription I regard as illegal, with the fact that South Africa is in this country illegally. South Africa's mandate was terminated in 1970, and from there we should have proceeded to independence. This law that is illegal now conscripts me to military service.
Voortgegaan het. En dis ag ek dit onwettig. En die wet wat onwettig is, die roep vir my op.
Die mense wat reeds wat as die gorillas aangesien word.
The people who are the guerrillas are those who are trying to get apartheid out of Namibia. So if I agree to conscription, then I am contributing to the maintenance of apartheid in this country.
Ek van my bereid verklaar het om apartheid nog binne die land te bou.
Firstly, I am a SWAPO supporter. So against whom must I fight? For whom must I fight? Military service serves only to protect white interests.
Ek sien dit as my eie broers.
I see them as my own brothers, because those that are fighting from the other side are refugees from Namibia. And if they are fighting from that side and I am fighting from this side, then I will be fighting against my own people.
Dan veg ek teen my eie mense.
By conscripting these young Namibians is to make them as a soldier to defend and to protect the interest of South Africa.
And I think it's a clear indication that South Africa is preparing the Namibian people for a civil war, as they've just quite clearly done in Angola, they've done in what they nearly attempted to do in Zimbabwe and what they've done in Mozambique.
On another hand, the second is that they are killing their own people. And this will create a hatred which will come up again in the future, that you have been killing our people or this section and we have to fight against you.
It's just making Namibianizing the war in a sense that it's now a matter of a lot of blacks or a lot of Namibians fighting against Namibians.
In a country where it is generally accepted that the South African government has got no sovereignty, and the people do not regard the South African government as a legitimate power in their country to be conscripted to fight for that country. It's almost like asking the Palestinians to fight in the Israeli army.
With 60% of Namibia's workers unemployed, hunger and poverty are persuasive factors. The salary offered by the military is sufficiently higher than incomes elsewhere to entice many volunteers, to the extent that SWATF boasts ranks of around 24,000.
Die mense is nie opgeleid nie. Die mense het nie geld om van te leven nie. En dus sien hulle die weermag as 'n plek.
These people are not educated. They have no money to live, and thus they see the army as a means of getting money to live. Even after they complete their 2 years and come home, then because they have no education, they have no place to go and get work. Then they see the army as the only place where they can get work and get money.
Van geld kry.
If I have to choose between the SADF and SWAPO, then I will fight for SWAPO. I will refuse. I will rather go to jail. I will not go to the army. The alternative I see is that I will go to jail.
Now, education at the present moment is also linked with the military, training, where you find that the army is drawing its conscriptions from the schools. And this is where the parents are becoming now confused. And then those who are against, who are resisting the army, won't favor that their kids should go to schools if the army is drawing their forces from the schools. The parents have all categorically rejected this whole attitude of the army. They requested the headmasters of the schools not to register their children, not to adhere to the demands of the army.
Berseba Ecumenical Private School is a living statement of protest by this community against state manipulation through education. The school provides an alternative education for 350 pupils from all regions of Namibia, and dormitories double up as classrooms, with instruction taking place in every available building, and even outside under the trees.
The community comes up and then they say enough is enough. We don't want this. They protest against the present setup of the schools, and then they demand for an alternative school. It's here where they organize themselves in community basis to have what they call private ecumenical schools, incorporating the different church denominations.
Evaporation of liquid.
Education is very important. Dit is baie belangrik.
Education is very important for Namibians because we want to rule ourselves in a country that is independent.
Self regeer in die land wat onafhanklik is.
Education is vir my baie belangrik.
Education is very important to me. In the past, we were never allowed a good education. Now we are fighting against that system to get a better education for ourselves.
Now I ask you, what is...
In the first place, this school is run by the people themselves. They decide what's going to happen here. The teachers are appointed by the people themselves, not by someone from outside. The parents decide on the language of instruction, for instance. And one can say it's almost completely in the control, in the hands of the people themselves.
Foot! Where's your foot?
Because they can decide on who is going to teach the children. They do choose or appoint teachers that they believe will give proper education to their children.
Providing an alternative to the ethnically based and inferior education system available to blacks in Namibia, schools like this one at Berseba are part of a nation-building objective towards unity in a future independent Namibia.
And then the parents or the community has come to realize that one of the important factors to unify the whole community is education. Once we have a united force on the education part, then it means the education itself is growing, and then it will also build up the nation towards unity.
People, hey, that's it.
is the culture, the workers, that is the culture, the peasants, that is the culture.
With illiteracy at 50% amongst the adult population, meaningful education is a priority embraced by student and labor movements in fulfilling the national aspiration for democracy and equality in a united independent Namibia.
I think education is very, very important for me and for all Namibians, because without education, I don't see a way out how people are going to be able to run affairs for themselves. And it's important, especially for our country, which is a third world country, and by the way, a country that have to be developed, a country that is still on its way to independence, that we equip ourselves with the abilities of when we get and attain independence, that we are able to run our own affairs and not some people from outside again.
Viva! Viva all the workers in the world! Viva! Viva! Viva Lady! Viva! Viva! We as the working class comrades, we build skyscrapers, we build motor cars, comrades, we build TVs, we build beautiful houses, comrades. But look, where do we live, comrades? We live in compounds, comrades. We live in sandy houses. Why is it like that, comrades?
You let me suffer. Please give me my living wages. I can wait so long.
Liberation will bring about a united Namibia, one nation, not looking upon ethnic groupings or tribal groupings, but then it will be a society where each and everyone has got mutual respect towards each other, a non-racial democratic society in which we live in peace, having to share whatever we've got. Yeah, there's obviously a place for whites. They are part, I think they have become an integral part of Namibian society. It has been clearly stated by our liberation movement, SWAPO, that once Namibia gets independence, it's a country that belongs to each and everybody, irrespective of color, black and white, yellow, pink, whatever, will have to stay in Namibia as long as they've got mutual respect, no feelings of one being inferior to the other one and one being superior to the other one. They've obviously got a place to stay in Namibia.
One could ask also why South Africa has to send the soldiers over here. Of course, they tell the people that they are here to protect the Namibians from SWAPO and from communism. But it is not. Why they have to kill the civilians? Why they have to destroy the property of the civilians people? Why they don't go then to fight if they want to fight the SWAPO freedom fighters? So we see that they are sent here to keep South African government in power in this country. They came to come over here to keep the minority still perpetuating the apartheid and the colonialism in this country. They have destroyed the moral life of the people. They have the effect on the psychological life of the people. The people sleep and remain in a fear during the day or during the night, and also that some people have been arrested and detained without being brought to the court, and also that people are being killed. During the night, the Kufut, the members of the security forces, come and pick up the people. People disappear. As you know, during the night or during the day, they can shoot aimlessly at random, and the bullets can pick up the people as far as the people moving.
After 22 years of war, the northern region of Namibia is a virtual battleground. Undetonated rockets and mortars, primed landmines, lie in wait for the unsuspecting. Concealed death on a footpath leading to a homestead or amongst livestock in the field. "16-year-old Paulus Arti, walking home from school in September 1987, picked up a primed explosive lying in the veld. "12-year-old Festus Thomas, while looking after cattle with his friends in May 1988, picked up a shiny object lying in the field. As he threw it away, the object exploded.
As you know that there is a curfew, no one is allowed to move. The civilians are not allowed to move during the night. And it was very, very difficult then when civilians become sick or be beaten up or something happened to her or to him, to take such a person to the hospital. You cannot do it.
Indiscriminately enforced, a dusk to dawn curfew provides a cloak of immunity for those members of the South African security forces acting outside of the law. Almost daily, people are killed and brutalized under the pretext of curfew violations. Mr. Shafuta Thomas, a shop owner, herding his cattle at around 5:30 p.m., was shot by South African security forces, an alleged curfew violation. Returning home, Paulus Shikali and Rebecca Muliofiko were fatally shot by Kufut near the Ngela hospital. After 5 hours of pleading, Rebecca died, and 7 hours later, Paulus was admitted to hospital by Kufut as a bomb blast victim. Because of disregard for civilian life and property by security forces operating in the northern war zone, a center has been established to monitor and expose human rights violations and to provide legal assistance to victims. The initiator of this center is David Smuts.
The denial of these human rights takes a couple of different forms. You have loss of life. We've had some deaths in detention. You have people who are killed under the cloak of the curfew provisions, very strict curfew provisions, which are very strictly and, in my view, most unreasonably enforced and leading to the death of people. We have disappearances, and we have masses of detentions. And then not only people dying and disappearing and being detained, but also people being assaulted. And then you also have the destruction of property.
Let us pray.
I have been confronted with numerous cases where people have been assaulted in detention. Sometimes the assaults have been of an extremely serious nature, to the extent where a judge of the Supreme Court commented on that. The former detainee who was brought before him in court, he simply said, "But this man has been beaten to pulp." You also have in detention other forms of abuse. People are held in solitary confinement for lengthy periods. That's also common. People are kept on spare diet, very little food, with inadequate exercise. I must just say that the conditions sometimes of detention are really quite appalling. Corrugated iron, little cubicles, really, you can't even call them huts, which in our very hot summers become incredibly hot for the people in there, with a cement floor, and during the winter they get very cold at night. the whole cause is made worse by the fact that the South African forces are not properly controlled and that they are quite oblivious to human rights. In fact, it's much worse than oblivious. They simply act as if they are not subject to laws on many instances. And in the northern area of this country, you almost have a state of lawlessness where they consider that what they do, they can do what they like, and that they're not subject to the normal law of the land.
And then furthermore, the centre will also be a way in which what is happening in northern Namibia becomes wider known, through the courts and through other ways.
Outraged at atrocities by South African security forces in the northern area, officials of the Avambaland administration have joined forces with human rights attorneys in obtaining affidavits from victims and bringing violations before the courts. By consistently exposing atrocities in the north, the Namibian newspaper has played a vital role in focusing local and international attention on human rights violations in Namibia.
Since its inception 3 years ago, the main editorial thrust of the newspaper has been in favor of human rights in Namibia, and we have had extensive coverage of human rights violations in the country, particularly in the far north of Namibia, where security forces ran amok among the civilian population. We believe that much of what is happening in the far north is still under a blanket of secrecy. So yes, we would welcome it if the police or the army, in either case, took us to court on our atrocities, because in most cases we can prove everything we have written and we'll get ample evidence on our side if this ever does come to court. We have been threatened by the police, by the army, and of course the staff of the newspaper have been the target on a number of occasions of either vandals who have stoned cars, slashed car tires, bullets fired against the office windows, and so on.
At times, if you knock off, you find that a car of the security forces is parked in front of your place there, and you walk past and you disappear in, and you look through the window. They'll remain there for 2-3 minutes and just disappear without telling you what they want or what they're looking for. I think they are just trying to intimidate one, I think.
Even in Katatura, where on occasion, we've been chased with Caspers, we've been chased on foot, we've been chased in cars. And I know what will happen if the guys catch you. You know, we've just been very, very fortunate. Well, I suppose they just don't like what we're photographing, the stories that we do, what Chris writes, the pictures that often accompany it, and they possibly see it as a threat.
The state president said quite clearly when he visited Namibia last time that the Administrator General was to be given more powers, particularly to deal with what he referred to sections of the media who are promoting what he called subversion and terrorism, as well as organizations promoting these same aims. Now, as yet, we don't know the form that such restrictions or steps will take, but we believe that it will follow a pattern similar to the state of emergency legislation in South Africa against the newspapers there. There'll be some sort of warning system and then a ban for 3 months, something to that effect.
Now, on the last visit of President Botha to Windhoek, these young task force members came up to me and said, look, I have 5 rounds, and these 5 rounds are meant for your face, man. Namibia, it seems, it's like basically a story long forgotten, and it's a constant battle of just informing the outside world, who often don't really know or care.
I want my country to be free. I feel it's important to draw the world attention back to the Namibian issue. I want people to read about what is happening here.
Get up, stand up, all the workers, do it right now, do it right now. I say, get up, stand up.
For really showing the outside world life within Namibia. Just not ordinary life, more than just ordinary life. The crisis that the people have to go through, live with, the war in the north. It's very important to convey that message to the outside world.
Well, I've seen many things really. I've seen women raped. I've seen kraals and crops destroyed by Casper trucks and buffalo trucks of the security forces. I've seen people really seriously assaulted. and the like. You know, it goes on. It's a whole list of things, really.
The one I really remember the most is of a young chap called Portus Blasius, who Chris and I went to visit in Oshikati Hospital after he had been taken in, questioned by some soldiers in the veldt. They pushed his face against his face against the exhaust system of this Buffel truck. And when we got to hospital, he had just also arrived in hospital, with his face completely burned.
And who had exhibited his rather shocking scars, actually, to the court. This policeman was asked how far would they go. And in reply to that question, the security policeman leaned forward and said, "But we didn't kill him, did we?" And he was then asked, "Yes, but how far does that mean you're prepared to go?" And he said, "Well, anything this side of death would be okay."
Also, we have many women whose life has been destroyed because they were raped. Raped by the members of the South African Security Forces.
Christophina Thomas, 14 years old at the time, was assaulted by 2 members of the South African Security Forces on January the 1st, 1986. When she resisted their demands, she was shot, once in the arm and twice in the stomach.
You see, usually the people do not make it very clear that this is the South African soldiers who are destroying the life and the property in this country, not the SWAPO. So the life of the people is really in danger as far as we have the South African soldiers in this country, and especially in the northern part of the country.
If history be the final judge, the Reiter Denkmal, erected to commemorate the German colonial troops who fell during the so-called Herero and Nama uprisings, is a monument to colonial arrogance and insensitivity. A tableau to the genocide of some 54,000 Hereros and 30,000 Namas, exterminated at the hands of the Kaiser's Schutztruppe in the early 1900s. Press conference, military headquarters, commemoration of the 10th anniversary of the Cassinga assault by South African security forces on a SWAPO camp in Angola, justification of a massacre, and perpetuating the heroic myth of the colonial aggressor.
En so 'n oorlog tog onvermydelik dat daar dan bykomstige mense in sulke terroriste base kan wees. Die Engelse woord van campfires is miskien 'n goeie beskrywing. Maar dit was minimaal. Taken by an air assault operation as far as Bloemfontein.
On May the 4th, 1978, the South African security forces, based in Namibia, launched an airborne attack on SWAPO camps at Cassinga, 240 kilometers inside the Angolan border. Codenamed Operation Reindeer by the South Africans, but mourned by the Namibian community as the Cassinga massacre, the attack left 147 men, 167 women, and 298 children dead. A further 689 refugees were wounded. Survivor of the massacre, Mr. Phineas Aluteni, testifies to the slaughter that took place at Cassinga.
So what followed then, the leaders in the camp ordered the people to go for hiding. Then before people could react, then bombs were already falling. So the first bombs fell at the kitchen, and the first victim was struck was at the kitchen. But fortunately, who's still alive, whose only right arm was completely destroyed.
Willie Amutenya, survivor of the Cassinga massacre, is chairman of the Justice and Peace Commission and a part-time kindergarten teacher.
You know, he was struck by the shrapnel just from the very beginning, as I said, and I took cover. And from there I crawled to the trench and I stayed there until the fight is over.
Then helicopters were already surrounding the whole place, so as to make sure that nobody would escape. So we were hiding then while watching how people, because most of the people were new and were not given any information, even there were a lot who didn't know what the trenches were for. So they were just running around in confusion and were just gunned down then by these fighters. And later on, the troops, the ground troops came, so surrounding the camp. Some were following the trenches, then shooting at people, beating them. Some were carrying just pick handles, while some were shooting or bayoneting the people who were hiding.
Because the siren, it's a sound to say that they must stop now, the fight is over. But some soldiers carried on to shoot on these people who are already, they were defenseless in the trench.
I've seen children being bayoneted to death or beaten up with pick handles. So they were beaten to death.
Within the fortress of Oshakati military headquarters, the South African security forces celebrate the 10th anniversary of their victory over SWAPO at Cassinga. Flown up from different regions of South Africa to take part in the celebrations are some 30 members of South Africa's elite paratroop battalion, part of the assault force of roughly 370 men who took part in the attack on Cassinga 10 years ago. Roughly 200 men and women were taken prisoner at Cassinga. Of these, 135 were detained in secret at a military base in the wasteland near Marienthal. Phineas Aluteni and Willie Amutenya were two of those held incommunicado by the South African security forces for 6.5 years.
So right from the beginning, there was no difference to whether a person is a man or a woman. We did the same jobs. And the most terrible one is only that they were given no facilities at all. They had to live like us. Those who didn't have clothes have to either to be given just a panty by someone else who had perhaps two, and so on.
The worst thing was because we were just kept at that place, and you are not told when are you going to be released, and you were not even told why are you kept there, because we tried also to ask. You found us in Angola, we didn't come to fight with you, and so we also got the right to leave this country because of many things which is very, very wrong. The system is very wrong for us, so we decided to go to Angola. We didn't come to fight you, we were just there. And now you came to attack us in another country. You brought us back. Now you are holding us in this place. That was very, very bad for us. You really do not know what will happen to you. Maybe you are going to be killed, or they can have you there for eternity. This was very, very disturbing, and it was very painful.
With the release of the Marienthal detainees, South African State President Mr. P.W. Botha invoked what is known as Section 103 Ter of the Defence Act for the first time in Namibia. This act, which enables the State President to terminate court proceedings if he feels it is not in the national interest, prevented the legal investigation into circumstances surrounding the detentions at Marienthal.
The State President tried to bar proceedings from coming to court, in which we had brought an application for the release of people who'd been detained for over 6 years without trial. There were over 100 people in this camp, and they had been captured in Angola, brought back to Namibia, and kept in detention without trial, without access to a lawyer, for over 6 years.
A certificate in terms of Section 103 Ter was again issued by the State President to terminate court proceedings against 6 South African Security Force members charged with the murder of Emmanuel Shafidi, stabbed to death at a SWAPO rally on November the 30th, 1986.
There was uncontested evidence under oath at the inquest into Shafidi's death that these people who broke up the meeting were members of the Defence Force and were bused to Windhoek from the northern areas to break up that meeting and to cause that sort of disruption.
The outcome of the inquest was that my father was killed by people from Battalion 101 on Ndangwa.
What has the certificate served to do?
Oshilanduliko oya kerere shikenengo ya ningingi nyomba pila nenjo ya stopping or
Ombapira ya kelela ona kujipa baha pangulwe.
It prevented or it stopped the people who they accused or the people who are accused of having killed my father not to be prosecuted.
Does Hilda think that this is a just thing that should be done?
Anu tadira neno kuchano shini mashiri monjiro shini mashiri pa uyukinenga no shobuke.
Kashiri pa uyukinendenant.
No, it's not a just thing. Well, the act here is again being used to stop the people who have been accused of killing or involved in the killing of Emmanuel Shifidi not being prosecuted after the Attorney General decided that there was sufficient evidence that they should be brought to trial. And what happened, in fact, I mean, the consequence of the certificate is that the state president stopped this prosecution, and that is the type of justice we have here.
As you have seen, South Africa continuously intensify its military forces. And many times it's still making raids in Angola. And our people will die. As you heard about the bomb blast which took place at First National Bank at Oshakati on February 19 this year and killed many people.
27 people were killed and 44 injured in the Oshakati Bank bomb blast. The majority of people injured and killed were black Namibians, many of them nurses. One child was also killed in the blast. As yet, no one has claimed responsibility for the incident. As with all unexplained incidents of violence in Namibia, the South African security forces were quick to cast the blame on SWAPO. SWAPO President Sam Nujoma categorically denied SWAPO's involvement in the blast and strongly condemned the atrocity. Nevertheless, the South African security forces lost no time in carrying out so-called retaliatory airstrikes into Angola, in which a number of civilians were killed.
These killings will continue again, many bomb blasts, and we want that these things should come to an end. People are tired of war. People are tired of seeing everyday South African soldiers. They want freedom, they want justice, they want peace.
South Africa's entrenched military occupation of Namibia is not easily dismantled. In the north, the siting of security force bases in the vicinity of secondary schools has precipitated massive school boycotts across the country, from students demanding that the bases be moved. Caught in the crossfire of battles between the security forces and planned guerrillas, the students fear for their lives. At Ponhofi Secondary School on the 10th of March 1987, planned guerrillas attacked the security force base situated alongside the school. Half an hour after the attack, mortars, fired from the direction of the base, hit the school dormitory. 2 15-year-old girls were killed. School authorities in the north, faced with the boycott crisis, are adamant that they do not want the military near their schools.
It is something which I can't speak particularly, but we don't need the army around the school.
Because they are torturing us very much. People are killed unnecessarily, and then they always beat the people.
The boycott, which began at Ponhofi Secondary School on the 17th of March 1988, spread throughout Namibia, involving more than 25,000 students.
The request that the base must be moved was made
years ago by the parents. Last year, 2 schoolgirls died in that connection and more than 8 harmed. The close of the school is only that the demand of the parents and the demand of the children is not answered, because we want the removal of the base near our school.
Associated with the issue of military bases is that of school children being abducted. These abductions have frequently occurred when security forces have been operating in the vicinity of schools.
They were taken on at night. The people come in the hostel were in uniform. They told them only to take their luggage and cross the boundary.
The abduction of children from Njendogo Secondary School took place during the night of April the 19th by men dressed in guerrilla uniforms. Once across the border, the men abandoned the children. At dawn, the school was surrounded by South African security forces and teachers arrested for not reporting the alleged SWAPO abduction. On returning to school, the children reported that a number of their abductors were white men with blackened faces who spoke to one another in Afrikaans. The opinion of the community is that if the abductors had been SWAPO guerrillas, then they would have taken the children to one of their many bases across the border and not merely abandoned them. This abduction, like many others, is believed to have been perpetrated by the security forces to justify the need for military bases in the vicinity of schools, that the military is needed to protect the children from alleged abduction by SWAPO guerrillas. Mystery and uncertainty surrounds the issue as abductions continue. On the 11th of May, under similar circumstances, children were abducted from the Okenamekwa Secondary School near Umbalantu. This youngster, who gave his name only as Ephraim, managed to escape.
So they began to select out 5 boys and they put them aside.
Did the men say who they were and where they were taking the children?
Yeah, and when number and good yeah, oh yeah, and number good yeah, Zapeni. No. Zani huna?
Kuzama kwa sasa hivi. Nati yamu kwa kuti. Unanambo niki na ushune mamorumbo. Mashina mana amanda shina mai kopo kuzama mai. Kalondoro bwa mandi ziko hinde gumbo.
And from there they said that no small kids have to turn back to their classrooms, and I decided to go along with the small kids, and from there I jump over the fence and come down to my residence place.
Was he afraid? Were the children afraid when the men told them to do this?
Yeah, yeah, of course, yeah. There was some began also to cry.
Does he expect to see his friends again?
I am doubting.
What do his parents say about this?
Yeah, they are just feeling very well because of that I am safe. I have not been abducted.
In spite of the looming national crisis, the South African authorities flatly refused to move military bases from the vicinity of schools in the north. By June 1988, more than 40,000 students boycott schools in protest. Spreading south to Windhoek and Katachira, the boycott is supported through Namibia by schools and higher educational institutions. Violence erupts as security forces attempt to break the boycott using tear gas, shambucks and rubber bullets. Student leaders are detained. In solidarity with the student movement, the National Union of Namibian Workers stages a 2-day stay-away to protest police violence against boycotting students.
The solution, brother, is that South Africa government should leave this country. the soldiers should go back home to South Africa. Why we have to continue the war? Why we have to kill the people? This is only the solution we see. South Africa should leave. People should be allowed to elect their own government.
We win! 10 years ago, we all accepted that Namibia would be independent. But South Africa, true to form, has continuously put obstacles in the way of implementing Resolution 435.
It is generally accepted that independence via United Nations Resolution 435, allowing for free and fair elections, will bring about a SWAPO government in Namibia. For the South African security forces and a proportion of the white minority in Namibia, this is a bitter pill to swallow. Constituting only 6% of the population, Namibian whites jealously control the economy and have possession of the bulk of the land.
The whites here have also been intensively propagandized over the years by the South African government and their local appointed representatives. The propaganda is essentially anti-SWAPO propaganda. It creates the impression that SWAPO is a communist terrorist movement which aims to decimate the whites inside Namibia, and I think this propaganda has largely been successful over the years.
For me, SWAPO is the enemy. For me, SWAPO is communism. For me, SWAPO is that organization that's going to take the freedom out of us. For me, SWAPO is a part, something like that is happening in Russia, in Romania.
But do you feel that a SWAPO government is communist-inspired?
Yes, definitely.
Why do you feel that?
Well, we hear it in the press, we see what is going on our borders.
Yeah, I think the only solution for our people in here is to pray against what the Bible also tells us, the black powers of the air, that take away peace, that take away our freedom, and that's what we must guard against.
I think they are confused in the sense that they think they can keep on, you know, with South Africa's help, just carrying on with the status quo. And most of the whites live in, let's say, Windhoek and some of the bigger places where they don't really experience the war. So they just want what they have, and even more of that. They don't think about justice, about real peace, because they think they live peacefully.
I'm white, and I'm a born Namibian for the third generation now, and I don't think that I would have joined SWAPO and become a member of SWAPO, and in fact also somehow a prominent member in SWAPO, if I hadn't been assured in my own mind that the whites have got a place in Namibia, and I've got absolutely no doubt about it, that whites have a role to play in the future Namibia, both economically and politically.
If the SWAPO government comes into power by means of free and fair elections, I won't have any problems. As long as they can guarantee freedom of speech, freedom of political rights, and all that kind of stuff.
I wouldn't mind. I really don't mind who's sitting on top, as long as they rule it with a fair hand and we have righteousness here and we can live peacefully. That's okay with me.
To ensure democracy and personal liberty with independence, a set of constitutional principles guaranteeing every aspect of personal and political freedom was included in the amendment to Resolution 435 in 1982. By all accounts, human rights is not the stumbling block to independence, but the attitude of the South African authorities to the outcome of free and fair elections in Namibia.
They realize that the outcome of a free and fair election would probably mean a SWAPO victory, and I think at all costs Mr. P.W. Botha wants to avoid the SWAPO flag being raised in Windhoek. But as far as Resolution 435 is concerned, it is the only plan on the table, still 10 years later. No other alternative has been given, even by those parties objecting to it. It is most definitely the settlement plan which is preferred by the majority of the Namibian population.
think 435 was the only compromising point between South Africa and SWAPO. So if it's not implemented, then I don't see any way out of it.
Oh yes, I mean at the moment this is the only hope that we have. We don't have any other alternative rather than 435. 435 is the only solution that will bring a sound and a healthy settlement in this country.
The only thing is that we're not going to fall back. We're still going to intensify our struggles in the years to come. If 435 doesn't come out in the near future, the struggle will just continue.
The Council of Judges in Namibia have repeatedly called the South African government to cooperate with the United Nations so that the United Nations Resolution 435 could be implemented. And we say it should be implemented without conditions. We see only that that's the solution, that the people will be given a chance to elect their own leaders, to elect their own government, and to determine their future.
Let us unite.